Week number 3, because I cannot talk today. Anyway, hello everybody, I'm Sarah, and before we get into today's video, I have a little something that I want your input on. And that is that I'm still figuring out my new camera that I got for Christmas. And so I felt like in the past few videos I looked a little bit washed out. And so I tried now for this video changing the settings on my ring light to a light that's a bit more yellow. And so I thought I'd ask your input. Do you even see a difference? Do you prefer the lighting as it is in this video, or do you prefer the lighting as it was in the past videos? And so please tell me in the comments which one you prefer, do you see a difference, and so on. Give me your input. But now that we have that out of the way, it is time for my first book haul of 2021, which of course is gonna be my Christmas book haul. Actually, I have a few different types of books in this book haul. The first, of course, is books I got as Christmas presents. For the other types, I need a bit of an explanation and story time. I think I already mentioned in a past video that over the holidays I helped my mom rearrange and clean her bookshelves. And while I did that, I also cleaned my own bookshelf that I still have at my mom's place. I have one bookshelf with about 70 to 100 books that I'm not emotionally ready to like let go of yet and to properly unhaul, but that I also don't have any space for here. And so I cleaned that shelf, and I noticed that some books that I had thought I had lost, I don't know, 6 years ago when I was moving or something, some of those books were actually like in the second row of my bookshelf at my mom's place. So I took them with me because I've been looking for them for a long time. I want to have them here, and I'm gonna haul them right now. So these are books that I have previously already read and that I'm just gonna haul now because why not? Then the second type are books that were mostly required reading in school that I kind of sneaked onto my mom's bookshelves, but that are actually my own books, which she was like, I don't have space for them, either you throw them away or you take them with you. So those are the second types of books, because a lot of them I decided to take with me because I thought that maybe now that they're not required reading, I maybe want to read them actually, and I'm gonna really enjoy them. And then the third type of books is books that I stole from my mom. So yeah, I guess the fourth type, because of course the first type was Christmas books. But yeah, with that all out of the way, that very long intro, let's get into the books and let's start with Christmas presents. The first book is probably one of the books I'm most excited for, and it's gonna be a reading project during the whole year, but that is Frauenlyrik Gedichte in deutscher Sprache, which would translate to women's poetry, poems in the German language. And this is a poetry collection, actually quite a hefty one. As you can see, it's like 900, 800, 900 pages. And this is poems by, for, and about women. And it's not just a poetry collection, it's also kind of an academic work, because you have a lot in here on like how to analyze poems and so on. Also different possibilities on how to analyze this specific collection, because the poems in here are printed chronologically, but then you also have marked kind of like poems that are from the same region, and you also have marked poems with the same like content, the same subject matter, and so on. And so you can probably read this book through multiple times, every time choosing a different way to read it. One time just chronologically, one time subject-wise, one time region-wise, and so on. And then there's also a lot of discussion in here on like the merit of a literary canon, and do we even need a literary canon, because of course there have always been marginalized groups that have been outside of the literary canon. I mean, I think even a few months ago on Twitter we had this discussion with, I think, the author, I think Jessica Cluas started that discussion, where she had this like really stupid thread, and where there was the discussion on like literary canon as it pertains to required reading in America. And yeah, so I'm really excited to read this. I'm probably gonna take the whole year, maybe even 2 years, maybe read it multiple times to, you know, read this. Then next I have two books that the lovely Cleo at Bemused Bookworm sent me for Christmas, which, like, thank you so much. I will leave her channel link down below. Definitely go and check it out. She actually reads a lot of similar books as I do, at least like genre wise. It's just that I think she reads a lot more literary fiction than I do generally. and she sent me one book off of my wish list, and then she added one book that she thought I might enjoy. And the first of those books is The Professor and the Housekeeper, The Housekeeper and the Professor actually, by Yoko Ogawa. I of course read The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa in 2020, and it made it onto my favorites of 2020 list. And this is another one of her novels. And in this novel we follow a professor and a housekeeper, obviously. And the professor actually is a brilliant maths professor who lives with only 80 minutes of short-term memory. And she is a sensitive and astute young housekeeper who is entrusted to take care of him. And it's kind of just about their daily lives. It's about their conversations and so on. It's a really short book actually. I think it's less than 200 pages. Yeah, it's 180 pages. And I cannot wait to dig into this. And then the book she sent me as recommendation was Daughter of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Jenny Wirtz, which is the first book in the, I don't know what the series is called, but it's a trilogy. And this is actually set in the same world as the Rift War, Serpent War series, which was why I was kind of hesitant actually to pick it up, even though I was recommended this once before in my comments already. Because I don't have the best experience with Raymond E. Feist. He was on my least liked of 2019, I think, list. And, you know, I've complained about him a lot already. But now that this has come so highly recommended to me, I am still quite excited to dig into this. I'm not exactly sure what this is about, but I think we're following a priestess of some kind, maybe? I'm not sure, but yeah. I'm excited to get to it, hopefully soon. Next, let's move on to 3 non-fiction books. One I got from my mom, I stole from my mom, and then 2 which were actually mine but were just left at my mom's place. And the first of those, which was mine obviously, once I show it you will know, is Claude Lévi-Strauss's Structural Anthropology 2. I don't know why I never bought the first part of this, but I only bought the second part obviously. And Claude Lévi-Strauss of course is a very famous anthropologist, one of the basic anthropologists we have to learn about. And yeah, I for some reason have a bookmark in here, but I don't think I have even started this yet, so I think it's just in here because the person at the checkout put it in. And yeah, I need to finally read this. There's so many books I need to read for anthropology, it's horrible. And then the second nonfiction that is actually my nonfiction, but that I just had at my mom's place, was Goethes Faust, erster und zweiter Teil, Grundlagenwerk, Wirkung, which translates to Goethes Faust, first and second part, basics, work, and I'm blanking on what Wirkung is in English, so I'm sorry. And this is by Johann Schmidt. And this, obviously, as the title suggests, is on Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust, his play, his very famous play. And I own this because, well, in school we had to write 4 final papers in 4 subjects. And we all had to write in German, in English and in maths, and then we could choose a 4th subject, which for me was history. And in German I chose to write on the figure of Faust. And of course Goethe's Faust, which is the most famous Faust iteration within the German language, was one of the works that I chose for that paper. So yeah, that is why I own this one. And I read parts of it. I didn't read it all though. And then lastly, and I'm sorry for holding this so weirdly, but my mom for some reason put a sticker on here with her address on it. But lastly, I have Simone de Beauvoir, The Other Sex, or The Second Sex, I don't know, one or the other, which of course is one of the most basic works and texts within feminist nonfiction. And I think it might actually in a lot of places be quite outdated already, because I think it was written in the 60s, I think, sometime, I don't know. But yeah, I still think it might be interesting to pick it up and to read it. Who knows when that will happen though. Let's move on to some books I had already read. The first of those is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I do have this exact edition already on my shelves though, but I wasn't sure if I had it like if that was the edition I had it, and I do have this kind of goal of collecting the Picture of Dorian Gray in as many editions as I can, because it's my favorite book of all time. Why wouldn't I? But yeah, also, even if it's the same edition, you can never have too many editions of the Picture of Dorian Gray, so, you know? By the way, for those of you who don't know what this is about a dude who sees his portrait and thinks, oh my god, how beautiful am I? I wish this portrait would age instead of me, and then it does. So yeah, that's the very quick summary. Then I finally found my original copy of Whitefang and Call of the Wild by Jack London again. This is one of my favorite classics of all time. It's one of the first classics I ever read. It's one of the first English books I ever read. Well, at least Call of the Wild. And this is my original copy. I think Call of the Wild I read in another copy as well. But like, this is one of the first English books I ever got. And so I'm quite happy that I found it again. And both of these books are kind of just books following wolf dogs. And they're really sad and really tragic, and if you don't like cruelty towards animals in books, then don't read this. Then I have a book I actually read for my final paper in English, and that was The Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling. As you can see, it is quite tabbed, and I'm also really happy that I finally found this again. And yeah, I don't think I have to tell anyone what The Jungle Books is about. But it's basically a collection of short stories. Well, actually, maybe I do have to tell you, because I don't think a lot of people know that there's other short stories within this collection that do not follow Mowgli. But yeah, most of the short stories are quite colonial, not gonna lie. And because of that, it's sometimes quite interesting to analyze this classic from a modern perspective. And then I am the odd Austrian person who can speak German. I mean, not the odd Austrian person who can speak German, but the odd person who is Austrian and can speak German, who also decided to want a copy of Grimm's fairy tales in English, because why not if you can read it in the original language as well? But anyway, aside from that, Grimm's fairy tales also is one of those classics where I do try to collect different editions from, because very few editions of Grimm's fairy tales are the completed collection. And also, I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually like light damage on the side here, where it's like almost bleached, which, you know, is interesting because it was in the very back of my bookshelf. Why would it be like that? Since we're already at Grimm's fairy tales, I do have another one of the fairy tale collections, as well as a collection of Brothers Grimm's collected German legends. I have read this. I mean, I haven't read this exact book, but I'm pretty sure I have read every single fairy tale that's in here. I have not read this though, so I still have to read this one. And then in the same editions, because these editions are famous in Austria and in Germany. These are Reclam, which is the publisher, and they have these editions of classics. They also have some in other languages, but they always have like different colors, and the yellow ones are the German classics. Not like classics from Germany, but classics that were translated into German. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Anyway, and I have right here two more classics that I read for my German final paper. Both are Faust iterations. This one is Klinger, Faust's Lebentaten und Höllenfahrt, which is a novel following Faust. And this one is Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, which of course Marlowe was a contemporary of Shakespeare, and I have read this one. I have not read this one. Some more Marlowe. I also have Dr. Faustus and Other Plays by Christopher Marlowe, and I did read Dr. Faustus not from this copy but from the other copy. I read it in German because, you know, I had to read it for a German paper. If I wanted to quote anything, I wanted to quote it in German, and it already was an exception that I was able to put an English work into my paper. But yeah, so I still have to read this chunker of a book, which, you know, I have started reading some plays, but I I'm not a fan of reading plays because usually I just don't enjoy them all that much. 5 books left. Let's look at the last book that I had on my own shelf that I took back here, and that is Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, which I had to read for French, obviously, and I also did read for French. Although I think I might have enjoyed it more if I hadn't read it in French and if I had understood more of the language and the writing. But yeah, what can you do? I don't really want to read it in another language, but it's all like written in here, written a lot, like the translations of the words and so on. And I actually read this in Morocco, which I can still remember that I had to read it over Easter, and I was in Morocco over Easter. Next, moving on to some books I had hidden on my mom's bookshelves. The first of those is Die Nibelungen neu erzählt by Michael Köhlmeier, which translates to Die Nibelungen Newly Told by Michael Köhlmeier. And this is kind of like, you know, Stephen Fry's Mythos and Heroes and now Troy. It's Michael Köhlmeier is one of those authors who like takes a lot of classics and also a lot of like ancient literature and so on and tries to retell them for a modern audience. And Die Nibelungen, das Nibelungenlied, is kind of like the Arthurian legend or Beowulf of German literature. It's like the big epic, the big heroes epic, and so yeah, I did read this actually. It was required reading. The next 2 books also were required reading, but I did not read those. The first of those is actually a book that was required reading for 3 whole times, I think, while I was in school, and that is Abschied von Sidonia by Erich Hacker, which I think the English translation of this book is Farewell Sidonia. And this is a story about the Second World War, except not really, because it kinda stops before the Second World War starts. But this is set in Austria in a kind of rural village. And one day a young girl with a little bit of a darker skin is left in front of the hospital. And so she gets adopted by this woman who has wished for a child for a very long time. But there's kind of the assumption that this girl is either Roma or Sinti. And if you know anything about the Second World War and the time before the Second World War, and even now, let's be honest, these ethnicities, these groups, these communities have not had it the best during that time. And of course, you know, we know all about the Jewish people who were sent to concentration camps, but Roma and Sinti were also very plentiful in being sent to concentration camps. And so we follow this young girl as she grows up in the time leading to the Second World War. And it's just a really hard-hitting and heartbreaking story. And we don't even find out what happens to her in the end. Sorry, spoiler warning. But the ending really isn't the point of the book in this case. But it's kind of left open, and it's kind of left open in a way where it's like, you know, we all know what happens to her and what happened to her. So, like, why even tell this story? And yeah, I never finished this book because I just never could bring myself to finish it, but I really should finally finish it. It's probably also a fun story about the movie to this book. My mom used to be a teacher and she watched it with a class once, but at the time she was pregnant and full of hormones, pregnancy hormones, so she cried through the entire movie and her class was just like, what the fuck is going on with Mrs. Teacher, like, why are you crying? You're making us uncomfortable. But yeah, so that is why I have never read this book, but I can still recommend this book because I did like what I read of it. I just could never bring myself to read through to the end, and I did watch the movie. And then I also have Die Vermessung der Welt by Daniel Kehlmann, which I think the English translation is Measuring the World. And this is kind of a speculative historical fiction literary type stuff. And in this one we follow 2 German scientists from the 18th century, 19th century. I think both lived in the 19th century. One of them is Alexander von Humboldt, who went on a lot of expeditions and like did a lot there. And the other one is Carl Friedrich Gauss, who some of you might know from mathematics because he's the one with like that curve that everyone has to know. Yeah, that was Gauss. And he also managed to find a way to, like, you know, measure the world for making maps and so on. And so yeah, I also never read this. I watched the movie, we all watched it in school, but I only read 40 pages of this, and I do want to finish reading this actually. But also I had, for my final exam in school, I had to read 30 books in a year, which, you know, doesn't sound a lot. I read 140 books last year, but all of them were classics, and, you know, I had to actually know all of them. So yeah, that was one of the reasons why I haven't read a lot of the books that I read for required reading or had to read for required reading. And actually I might want to do a project, like thinking of the books I can still remember from required reading and doing a month of just reading those. But yeah, my battery light is blinking, so now let's quickly move on. And the last book I have right here is Der Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. This one I stole from my mom because she had 2 copies. By the way, Simone de Beauvoir, she also had 2 copies. And I do not know what this one is about, so yeah, that is that. But yeah, that was it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where we read one adult fantasy book written by a woman per month, are also linked down below. I'm trying to talk very quickly so that I can finish before the battery is over. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, then I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!